The air at Alcarge Forward Operating Base tasted of grit and scorched patience. It was a fine, pervasive dust that worked its way into everything. The seals of sensitive electronics, the threads of uniforms, the back of one's throat. It was the taste of limbo, a permanent state of waiting for either the signal to advance or the order to return home. Inside the Tactical Air Control Center, a windowless concrete box known unaffectionately as the Cube, the air was different, but no better. Here, the grit was replaced by the artificial chill of overworked climate control systems battling a relentless desert sun, a metallic tang of ozone from banks of humming servers, and the faint, ever-present specter of stale coffee and microwavable burritos. The only light was the cold, blue-white glow of dozens of monitors, each a portal into the vast, unforgiving sky that stretched over the entire sector. This sky was a three-dimensional chessboard of staggering complexity, filled with billion-dollar pieces moving at supersonic speeds, and the men in this room were the grandmasters who kept them from becoming tragic headlines. In a corner of the adjacent break room, a small, sterile antechamber with a dented refrigerator and a perpetually sticky floor, a woman sat alone. She was unremarkable to the point of being invisible. Her hair was a nondescript brown, pulled back in a simple, functional tie. She wore civilian clothes, a plain gray blouse and dark, practical slacks that seemed out of place amidst the sea of sand-colored flight suits and camouflage patterns. She held a ceramic mug in both hands, though she was not drinking from it. She simply stared at the dark, still liquid within, her posture one of absolute stillness. She was not a part of the restless energy that hummed through the cube, the nervous leg jiggling and the constant, low-level chatter of professionals under pressure. She was an island of calm in a sea of controlled chaos, an anomaly that, until now, had gone largely unremarked upon in the churn of rotating shifts and transient personnel. Her presence was a question mark no one had bothered to solve, assuming her to be some visiting administrator, a logistics specialist, or perhaps a psychologist attached to the wing for morale. Major K. Jensen did not deal in question marks. He dealt in absolutes. As a fighter pilot, his world was binary. Target or no target, threat or non-threat, cleared hot or hold fire. He strode into the break room with the unearned confidence of a man for whom the world had always made way. His call sign, Viper, was stitched onto his flight suit, and he wore it like a title of nobility. He moved with a coiled, athletic grace, but his energy was loud, an announcement of his own arrival. He was coming off a 4-hour combat air patrol, and the adrenaline still sang in his veins, demanding an outlet. He saw the woman in the corner, this gray, civilian island in his world of green and khaki, and his mind, trained to identify things that were out of place, flagged her instantly. To him, she was not just an anomaly. She was an intrusion. He ripped open the refrigerator door, the motion unnecessarily aggressive, and surveyed the meager contents. He grabbed a can of energy drink, its metal skin sweating in the humid air, and cracked it open with a percussive hiss that made 2 junior airmen flinch. The woman did not move. She did not even seem to register the sound. Her focus remained entirely on the black mirror of the coffee in her mug. This stillness, this utter lack of reaction to his presence, was a grit of a different kind. It was an irritant, a challenge to the gravity he expected his rank and persona to exert on any room he entered. He sauntered over to her table, leaning against it with a casual arrogance that was meticulously practiced. The metal legs of the table scraped against the linoleum. "You know, ma'am," he began, his voice a low drawl that was meant to be charming but landed as condescending. "This is a restricted area. TACC is for operational personnel only. The admin building is back past the flight line. I'm sure someone there can help you with whatever paperwork you're shuffling." The woman finally lifted her head. Her eyes were a cool, clear gray, the color of a winter sky over the ocean. They held no surprise, no fear, no anger. They were analytical, as if she were observing a peculiar specimen under a microscope. She blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion. "I am aware of my location, Major," she said. Her voice was quiet, calm, and carried a strange, almost clinical precision. It was a voice that did not waste a single decibel on emotion. Her placid response only fanned the flames of his irritation. He had expected deference, perhaps a flustered apology, a hasty retreat. He had not expected this unnerving self-possession. It was like shouting at a granite cliff face. The silence that answered was more powerful than any retort. He took a swig of his drink, the sweet, chemical taste doing little to soothe his mood. He decided to press the issue, to force the reaction he felt was his due. This was his domain, and he was the viper in the garden. Awareness and authorization are two different things, he said, letting a smirk play on his lips. He gestured vaguely at her civilian attire. No credentials, no uniform. You look a little lost. This is the pointy end of the spear, not a corporate retreat. We have men and women in here managing live-fire situations, real-world kinetics. The last thing they need is a civilian tourist wandering into the nerve center. The accusation hung in the air, thick and unpleasant. The two junior airmen at the other end of the room suddenly found the scuffs on their boots to be of immense interest. They could feel the temperature in the room dropping, the pressure changing. They knew Major Jensen's reputation. He was a brilliant pilot, one of the best, but his ego was a tangible force, a weather system that everyone else had to navigate. They had also, in their brief time in the cube, noticed the quiet woman. She had been there for 3 days, always in the same corner, always quiet, always observing. She was a ghost at the feast, and Viper was trying to exorcise her. Section she did not rise to the bait. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, which he now saw was cold. The gesture was infuriatingly dismissive, a lioness allowing a jackal to dance at the edge of its kill radius. She placed the mug back on the table with a soft click that seemed to echo in the tense silence. My authorization is in order, she stated simply. It was not a defense. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same finality as a physicist stating the law of gravity. This was too much. His smirk tightened into a sneer. He was Major Cade Viper Jensen, a man who had flown over hostile territory, a man whose hands guided a 20-ton machine of death and destruction. He would not be dismissed by some paper-pushing bureaucrat in his own house. He leaned in closer, invading her personal space, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, threatening whisper. Look, I don't know who you are or what desk you're supposed to be chained to back in Virginia, but you're in my world now. And in my world, people who don't belong get shown the door. This is a high-security facility. Your presence here is a risk. So I'm going to ask you one more time nicely. Exit this facility. Now. He straightened up, crossing his arms, a clear posture of dominance. He had laid down the law. He had asserted his authority. The junior airmen held their breath, waiting for the inevitable capitulation. They expected her to finally break, to gather her things and flee from the sheer force of his personality. The woman did not flinch. She did not turn. Her eyes remained locked on his, her expression unchanged. The calm was no longer just unnerving. It was unnatural. It felt like a deep, tectonic pressure building beneath the surface of the earth. She was about to speak, to deliver another one of her infuriatingly placid statements, when the world ended. It began not with a bang, but with a flicker. The lights in the break room, and by extension the entire cube, blinked once, twice, then died completely, plunging the windowless complex into absolute, disorienting darkness. For a heartbeat, the only sound was a collective, sharp intake of breath. Then, the emergency lights kicked in, casting the room in a hellish, pulsating red glow. Simultaneously, a klaxon began to blare, a deafening, rhythmic scream that vibrated through the concrete floor and into the bones of everyone present. It was not a drill siren. It was the sound of catastrophic failure. From the main control room came a chorus of shouts, a symphony of panic. What the hell was that? Power is down. Switching to backup. I've lost the feed from Sector Gamma. Multiple contacts just vanished from the board. Major Jensen was momentarily stunned. His petty confrontation forgotten. Instinct took over. He spun around and charged into the main control room, his mind already cycling through emergency protocols. The scene that greeted him was chaos theory made manifest. The main tactical display, a massive screen that usually showed a serene, God's eye view of the entire airspace, was a mess of corrupted data, flickering symbols, and static-filled dead zones. Controllers were shouting into dead headsets, their faces pale and slick with sweat in the crimson light. The calm, controlled environment of the nerve center had shattered into a million pieces. The Grandmasters had lost the board. The wing commander, a grizzled colonel with a face that looked like it had been carved from naval tradition itself, was bellowing for a sitrep, his voice barely cutting through the din of the alarm and the rising panic. "Someone tell me what's happening. Is it a ground attack? A cyber breach? Talk to me." A meteorologist, a young lieutenant with terror in his eyes, finally managed to get a partial reading from an independent sensor. "Sir, it's not an attack. It's the weather, a supercell, a microburst of some kind. But the models didn't. It came out of nowhere. The shear force winds are off the scale. It's like a hurricane just materialized on top of us." The implications slammed into Jensen with the force of a physical blow. A storm of that magnitude meant every aircraft in the sky was in mortal danger. They would be tossed about like leaves, their sensitive instruments fried by atmospheric electricity, their pilots fighting for control against forces that could tear the wings off a jet. They were blind, and the ground was blind. The cube, their all-seeing eye, had been put out. The colonel grabbed a radio handset, trying to raise the tower. "Tower, this is Warlord. Do you copy? What's the status of the field?" Only static answered. The storm had severed their connection to the outside world. They were an island, and the tide was rising. It was in this moment of utter chaos, as seasoned professionals succumbed to the paralysis of an unprecedented crisis, that she moved. The quiet woman from the break room entered the control room. She did not run or shout. She walked with a fluid, economical grace, her steps measured and deliberate. The pulsating red light glinted off her calm, gray eyes, which were now scanning the room not with fear, but with an intense, focused clarity. She moved through the panicked airmen like a surgeon walking into an emergency room. Her presence was a pocket of silence in the heart of the storm. She walked directly to the primary air traffic control station, where a senior sergeant was frantically trying to reboot his console, his hands shaking. The woman placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Step aside, Sergeant," she said. Her voice, though still quiet, cut through the noise like a laser. It was not a request. It was a command wrapped in the velvet of politeness. The sergeant looked up, his face a mask of confusion and desperation. "Ma'am, the system is down. Nothing is responding." "I see that," she replied, her gaze already fixed on the screen, which was displaying a cascade of error messages. "Get me a hard line to the primary comms array, and patch it directly into this console. Bypass the central server entirely." Her order was so specific, so technical, and delivered with such quiet authority that the sergeant, acting on pure reflex, simply complied. "Yes, ma'am," he scrambled to obey, pulling a tangle of cables from a maintenance locker. Major Jensen watched this unfold with a sense of profound dislocation. Who the hell did this woman think she was? A civilian giving orders in the middle of a code-red emergency? He started to move towards her, to put a stop to this insanity, to reassert the chain of command. But the wing commander put a hand on his chest, stopping him. The colonel's eyes were locked on the woman, his expression a mixture of confusion and a dawning, desperate hope. He saw something in her bearing, a complete lack of panic, that was more commanding than any shouted order. He decided in that split second to let this play out. Their way was not working. Perhaps hers would. The sergeant connected the hard line. The woman's fingers flew across the keyboard, a blur of motion. She wasn't using the standard graphical interface. She was typing directly into the system's command line prompt, her commands a stream of alphanumeric code that looked like a foreign language. On the screen, the error messages vanished, replaced by raw data streams. She was manually rebuilding the entire air picture from the ground up, pulling in fragmented data packets from surviving sensors and piecing them together. Within 30 seconds, a skeletal, rudimentary version of the Airspace appeared on the main screen. It was not the clean, polished display from before, but a raw, ugly wireframe map. But on it, blinking erratically, were the transponder signals of a dozen aircraft. A dozen aircraft that were currently flying through a meat grinder. The woman donned a headset from the console. She adjusted the microphone, her movements precise and unhurried. She took a single, centering breath. And then she spoke. "This is Watchtower to all airborne assets in the Al-Kharj sector, on guard frequency. I say again, this is Watchtower. Your primary control is offline. I am your new controller. Acknowledge." Her voice over the comms was transformed. It was the same calm, clinical tone, but amplified, stripped of all warmth, and sharpened into an instrument of pure command. It was the voice of God in the storm. A cacophony of panicked voices answered her. "Mayday, Mayday. We are in an uncontrolled spin. Watchtower. This is Havoc 2-1. We've lost all navigation. I have multiple warning lights. My engine is stalling." The woman did not raise her voice. She did not acknowledge the panic. She absorbed it, processed it, and responded with ice-cold logic. "All aircraft, cease transmissions. Havoc 2-1, you are first. Your current altitude is 9,000, descending rapidly. You are in a wind shear. Do not fight it. Decrease throttle to 70% and deploy speed brakes. Let the aircraft fall with the air mass. I will guide you out of the column. Acknowledge." There was a pause, then a shaky voice from the radio. "Roger, Watchtower. Decreasing throttle. Havoc 2-1, you are now stabilized. Turn heading 030. You will find a pocket of stable air in approximately 45 seconds. Stand by." She moved on to the next, her mind a supercomputer processing a dozen simultaneous crises. "Ogre 4, you have a flameout. Initiate emergency restart sequence. Your altitude is sufficient. Do not panic. Nomad Flight, you are on a collision course. Nomad 1, climb immediately to 12,000. Nomad 2, descend to 8,000. Execute now." The control room had fallen silent. The only sounds were the wail of the klaxon, the hiss of the radio, and her voice. Every person in the room, the colonel, the junior airman, and a dumbstruck Major Jensen, was frozen, watching the masterclass unfolding before them. She was not just controlling traffic. She was flying a dozen planes at once from a chair on the ground. Her voice a lifeline reaching through the storm to pilots she could not see. She was painting a picture of the sky in her mind, a four-dimensional map of wind, altitude, speed, and time, and she was moving the pieces with the effortless grace of a Kasparov. She was a conductor, and the storm was her orchestra. For 20 minutes, she performed this impossible symphony. She guided planes through shears that should have ripped them apart. She talked pilots through engine failures and instrument blackouts. She deconflicted flight paths with mere seconds to spare. She was a calm, immovable object against which the irresistible force of the storm broke and shattered. One by one, the panicked voices on the radio were replaced by voices filled with a new emotion. Awe. "Watchtower, Havoc 2-1 is in stable air. You saved us. Watchtower, Nomad Flight is clear. On your heading." "Jesus Christ, Watchtower, who are you?" came one voice, a young pilot, his terror replaced by sheer, unadulterated wonder. Jensen stood rooted to the spot, his world completely upended. The woman he had tried to eject from a break room, the civilian he had dismissed as a paper pusher, was single-handedly saving the entire wing. Her quietness was not weakness. It was the coiled stillness of absolute competence. Her plainness was not mediocrity. It was the camouflage of a predator. He had seen a gray sparrow and mistaken it for prey, only to discover, in the heart of the fire, that it was a phoenix. His condescension, his arrogance, his entire worldview felt like a cheap, hollow thing in the face of what he was witnessing. The shame was a cold, heavy weight in his gut. The storm began to abate as quickly as it had arrived. The winds lessened, the electromagnetic interference cleared. The main systems in the cube began to flicker back to life, the red emergency lights replaced by the familiar, steady white. The main screen rebooted, showing the clean, orderly tactical display once more. On it, a dozen aircraft were now arranged in a perfect, safe holding pattern, circling the base, waiting for instructions to land. The crisis was over. The woman in the controller's chair gave her final instructions, her voice still a calm, precise monotone. All assets, Warlord is back online. Your primary control is reestablished. Squawk standard and await instructions for recovery. She then took off the headset, placing it carefully back on its hook. She looked at the screen for a moment, her work confirmed, then turned. The entire room was staring at her, their expressions a mixture of shock, gratitude, and profound respect. It was at that moment that a new voice cut through the speakers, this one not from a pilot in the air, but from a ground channel. It was a voice that radiated authority, a voice that had the gravel of age and the polish of command. Warlord, this is General Thorne. I was in a holding pattern 30 miles out when this whole thing went sideways. I heard the whole thing on guard. Who is the controller who just handled that furball? I want a name. The wing commander keyed his mic, his own voice shaky with residual adrenaline. General Thorne, sir, we are not sure. It was a civilian. There was a pause on the line, pregnant with meaning. Then the general spoke again, his voice now holding a note of dawning realization, of something clicking into place. Civilian? Put her on. The colonel looked at the woman, who simply nodded. He handed her the microphone. She keyed the transmission. This is Watchtower, she said. Another pause. Longer this time. The silence stretched, filled with a tension that was different from before. This was the tension of a mystery about to be solved. Then the general's voice returned, and it was completely changed. All traces of the gruff commander were gone, replaced by a tone of pure, unadulterated reverence. Valkyrie? The general whispered, the single word dropping into the silent room like a depth charge. Is that you? The woman allowed a small, fleeting ghost of a smile to touch her lips. Hello, Marcus. It's been a long time. The effect of that name, Valkyrie, was instantaneous and catastrophic for Major Jensen's ego. It was not just a name. It was a legend, a ghost story that senior pilots told to scare rookies. Valkyrie was the callsign of a DARPA project lead from the late 90s, a mythical figure who had designed the very battle management software they were using. The legend said Valkyrie wasn't just a programmer. She was a prodigy, a savant who could see airspace in ways no human should. She had been a controller during the First Gulf War, a civilian contractor whose ability to manage chaos was so profound that pilots believed she was an AI. She was credited with orchestrating impossible rescues, with seeing enemy movements before they happened. Then, she had simply vanished, her project classified, her name relegated to the status of a modern military fable. General Thorne's voice came over the speaker again, this time addressed to the entire room, a public proclamation. Attention in the TACC. The controller you have on the floor is Dr. Evelyn Reed. She is here under my direct authority as the final oversight for the Aegis network upgrade. She holds a GS-18 clearance, equivalent to a 4-star general. All personnel will afford her every courtesy and render any and all assistance she requires. Warlord, confirm. The wing commander, his face slack with shock, stammered a reply. Confirmed, General. Understood. The legend was real, and K. Jensen had just tried to throw her out of a break room. The cold weight in his gut turned into a black hole, pulling all the air from his lungs. He felt the eyes of the 2 junior airmen on him, and he could feel their pity, which was somehow worse than scorn. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the woman he had called a tourist, stood up. She walked past the rows of stunned controllers and stopped directly in front of him. She was not tall, but at that moment, she seemed to tower over him. Her gray eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were disappointed. It was the look of a master craftsman examining a flawed tool. Major Jensen, she began, her voice returning to its quiet, conversational tone, which was somehow more intimidating than her command voice. Your performance today was suboptimal. Your first error was tactical. You confronted a person in a secure facility without first ascertaining their identity or purpose. You assumed, based on superficial data, my gender and my clothing, and you assumed incorrectly. In your line of work, a flawed assumption can get a pilot killed. Today, your flawed assumption merely made you look like a fool. You are fortunate. She paused, letting the clinical indictment settle over him. He could not speak. His throat was closed, his face burning with a shame so profound it was physically painful. Your second error, she continued, her voice relentless in its precision, was a failure of situational awareness. You allowed your ego to dictate your actions. You perceived a challenge to your authority where none existed. Your need to dominate a room, to be the loudest voice, is a liability. True authority is not claimed. It is demonstrated. It is the natural result of competence. It radiates like heat from a furnace. It does not need to announce its presence. You, Major, are all announcement and no heat. Every word was a perfectly placed scalpel, dissecting his character, laying bare the insecure foundations of his arrogance. He had been publicly, systematically, and completely dismantled, not by a superior officer shouting him down, but by a quiet woman speaking the unvarnished truth. Conventional punishment would be a letter of reprimand in your file, she said, her head tilted slightly. But that is an inefficient method of education. You do not learn from paperwork. You learn from experience. Therefore, effective immediately, you are reassigned. The general has already approved it. You will be my new executive aide for the duration of my time here. You will carry my bags. You will fetch my coffee. You will sit in every briefing and every technical debrief. You will watch, you will listen, and you will learn the difference between projecting authority and actually possessing it. Is that understood? He could only manage a single, choked word. Yes, it was not the crisp affirmative of a military officer. It was the whisper of a defeated man. Yes, Dr. Reed, she corrected him gently. Yes, Dr. Reed, he repeated, the name feeling foreign and heavy on his tongue. She gave a single, sharp nod. The lesson was complete. She turned and walked back toward the controller's station, already discussing the system's performance during the storm with the wing commander, her focus instantly shifting back to the mission. For her, the confrontation was over, a problem identified and a solution implemented. For Kay Jensen, it was just the beginning. The story of that day in the cube became the stuff of legend at Al-Kharj, and eventually throughout the entire Air Force. It was told in officers' clubs and maintenance bays, a modern fable passed from one generation to the next. The details would shift with each telling. The storm would grow more violent. The number of planes would increase. Dr. Reed's commands would become ever more prophetic, but the core of the story, the essential truth of it, remained unchanged. It became a teaching tool, a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and the power of quiet competence. Major Kay Jensen, as promised, served as Dr. Reed's aide for the next 6 months. It was the most grueling and humbling experience of his life. He saw a mind at work that operated on a level he could barely comprehend. He watched her deconstruct complex software problems with the same ease she had deconstructed his ego. He saw generals and senators defer to her judgment. He learned that her quietness was not a lack of things to say, but a discipline of only speaking when it was necessary and impactful. He learned that her civilian clothes were not a sign of weakness, but a symbol of a different kind of power, a power based not on rank or regulation, but on a foundation of pure, undeniable skill. He fetched her coffee, and he learned humility. He carried her briefing books, and he learned servitude. And in the process, he was remade. Years later, Colonel Kay Jensen stood before a lecture hall of new cadets at the Air Force Academy. His own face was now carved with the lines of experience and wisdom. The arrogant swagger of his youth was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant calm that reminded some of the old-timers of the very woman who had transformed him. He was one of the most respected instructors at the academy, known for his focus on the psychology of command. There will come a time, he told the sea of young, eager faces, when you will be tempted to judge a person based on their appearance, their gender, their rank, or the uniform they wear or don't wear. You will be tempted to believe that the loudest person in the room is the one in charge. That is the most dangerous assumption a leader can make. He paused, letting his eyes drift across the room, making contact with the future leaders of the Air Force. I want to tell you a story about a storm, a control room, and a quiet woman in a gray blouse. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Reed, but the pilots she saved that day, and the ones she saved long before, they called her Valkyrie. And he told them the story. He told them everything, leaving out no detail of his own foolishness, his own arrogance. He used his own humiliation as the ultimate teaching tool. He taught them that the most dangerous threat is not the enemy you can see, but the one you underestimate. He taught them that true strength doesn't need to boast. He taught them that competence is the only currency that matters when the sky is falling. The lesson, born in the crucible of a desert storm and delivered through the quiet authority of a hidden master, became his legacy. It was a legacy built not on his skill as a pilot, but on the wisdom gained from his greatest failure. In the end, the story is not about one woman or one man. It is a timeless parable, a reminder for any institution, any organization, any individual who confuses style with substance or volume with value. It is a testament to the quiet professionals, the hidden masters who exist in every field. They are the ones who do not seek the spotlight, who do not crave recognition. They are the gray, unremarkable figures in the corner of the room. But they are the ones who, when the lights go out and the alarms begin to scream, walk calmly into the storm and hold the world together, not with boasts or threats, but with the simple, devastating power of knowing exactly what to do next. Let your actions be your argument. Let your competence be your crown. For in the moments that matter, it is the only authority that cannot be questioned.